I want to get to that question because I haven't really pre-thought about my answer that much. Also because I thought about, well, I could ask you the question was like, what do you feel about pay for display? And so it was like, well, I could get you to clarify that too, because I'm like, I could take that in more than one way. So I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'll try and answer it, and then you can clarify for me even what you meant and kind of how you feel about it. And I knew that, I didn't know for sure if you were in that core membership or not, but I knew you were a part of this collective. So it was like, I kind of have a little bit of context for maybe where you're coming from, but still, I was like, well, I don't know exactly. For me, so when I thought of it, I was thinking of like, well, in so many aspects, every time I've shown, I've had to pay in one sense or the other. Usually it's from, the gallery takes a commission, whether it be a standard like 30%, some places if it was really like, no place I've ever shown, it's like 50% or whatever.
That's standard gallery fee.
Yeah.
Usually, yeah, for commercial galleries.
Exactly, and I've only ever shown really more like community-based or whatever, or, through school there was no commission on that, and for a BFA exhibition or our student gallery. But any other place, it ranged from 30 to 10 to nothing at all. Like right now, it's street legal, it's nothing. Like you just get to show, and whatever, if someone buys it, then that's all yours. So, in other aspects, I think even what you're doing as a collective is like, well, you're paying for a space. It's not paying to have the opportunity to show in like the tradition, like, you're not asking the guest artist like, hey, if you pay $20 you can show. It's not that type of pay for display, but I'm like, well, you still have to rent a space, and you as a collective are paying for a space sometimes, or in some cases you said they're donated. So in that case, you're lucky enough that, hey, we found a donated space that works, fantastic, and by searching those places out. I don't know, I was just playing around with the definition of pay too, because I was like, well,
specifically I did mean, so there's tons of opportunities, and you'll see them online, and I'm sure you've been approached by these galleries that are really interested in your work, and we think it's great, and we want to show your stuff on our site. It will just cost you $50. Or there's galleries that work that way. There's juried competitions, high value competitions where you can win, $50,000, $100,000, but it's going to cost you $150 entry fee, and they own your work in perpetuity. So if they want to use it in all their advertising, that's the kind of way I meant pay to display. There's always, you're right, there is always pay. Like the downtown space was not donated. We had to pay for that space. So we hold multiple fundraisers throughout the year to be able to afford to do those things.
Yeah. So with the context, I guess, with that clarification, I mean, like, it reminded me of something I haven't thought about since, I don't know how long, like years and years and years, about when I was in high school, and like I mentioned earlier, just when we were kind of talking, that I used to write way more than I created visual art. I wasn't creating visual art at that time at all in high school, just writing poetry and a little bit of prose and some songs and stuff. And I remember that, I don't remember how I heard about the opportunity, but it was this thing, it was like Songs on the Wind, and it was like, if you pay like this $20 and you send us like a poem or whatever, we'll publish it. And then they sent you like the hardcover book. And I was like, oh wow. And I was really happy with this poem I wrote, and I remember that someone else in my school did it as well. But I was just like, it didn't click until later. They were like, well, how much did it cost to print the book? How much, like, I'm like, this, for lack of a better word, was a scam, is how I felt.
They made a ton of money off of your work.
Yeah. And it was just like, to just have this hardcover thing, was like, yeah, I got that, and how much of that, like, it really wasn't about showcasing my work or someone believing in my work, and not that would necessarily matter, especially with stuff that you've mentioned. It's like the philosophy of almost the collective is like, yeah, you don't need someone to tell you your work has value in order to do that, right?
Yeah.
And especially back then, I mean, like, it wasn't as accessible for me to just like, I just post my writing on Instagram now or whatever, right? Like, or if I had like a blog or wherever, people could, if they could find it, then they could appreciate it. I don't need someone else to give me the rights to the internet, like, or for you guys, like, just the rights to a space. Like, you need to find a space, you can do that in various amount of ways, and then you just put up what you want to put up, without having that other extra barrier of someone valuing the work.
And I got frustrated. We talked a bit about playing in bands and being musicians and stuff, and that was always the frustration. Is so many venues always wanted you to play for free because it was well, we're gonna pay you an exposure.
Oh,
And it's the same,
classic.
it's the same thing as like
Yeah.
the art. Well, you can pay to display because it'll get you exposure to all these things, or these Instagram ads. It's only $30. Yeah, but you're making the lion's share off of the 10,000 hours you didn't see that got to this painting that I just made. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that was what was frustrating, is like you're not paying for this painting, you're paying for the 500 paintings I made to get to this painting. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that the Guerrilla Art Collective is not pay for display, and
Yeah.
we never ever will be. If it ever goes that way, that's probably where I'll part ways.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that it would, because we all seem to share that idea that it shouldn't cost you to have your work seen. You've already put your dues in.
Yeah. I think most of the time the stuff that you mentioned, if it was like online, I immediately think of, well, that's not legit. Like, especially if you're just displaying it digitally or having rights or whatever, whether it be like a physical gallery space, I haven't really seen that in that, in the commission aspect, yes, like, but that's the thing, they've approved the work ahead of time, so I know that they, in a way, it's a sign that they want it to sell as well, because they are making money off the commission, rather than it's upfront fee, that's it, and if your work sells or not, if we promote it or not, if anyone sees it or not, it doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't really been faced with that too much, if at all, that I can think of. I think that, I don't know, that's the tricky thing about exposure too, is like, so, I have done pay-per-display stuff now that I think of it. We were talking earlier about how, when I first moved here, I did like 3 of these like trade show type events in a row, and I went in the hole.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I had to pay for a table.
Yeah.
I paid for a table, and no one was like, whoa, let's see your work first. No, it was like, oh, you make art, cool. You know, it's...
They don't care, they wanted the $200 for the table.
Yeah.
They don't care if you sell the thing or not.
Yeah, so in that aspect, I've totally done that. And in Saskatoon, it probably would have been more successful there. It's 3 times the size, and there's a bigger population, so maybe more people would be there, and someone would connect with the work differently. But I did Fringe there, which is on the street stuff, and I made the cost of my sidewalk space back. I remember that the couple of years that I did it, but it still wasn't very satisfying. But I thought, again, I'll come here, and there's a whole bunch of different shows. I couldn't believe how many different things they had in Tabor and in Lethbridge, whatever. And between the 3 of them, I think I spent like $200 on the table space, and only sold 1 item for $10. And I did that within the first 6 months, and I said I'm never doing it again. And yeah, it was, that's the thing. It wasn't just for display. So I mean, that's the other thing too. It was paying for a space to display something, to sell something.
Yeah, that's a different, I mean, markets do offer, it's kind of a different area. When I asked the question on Instagram, and I know it's vague because you only have so many characters to write a question, but I was thinking, the thought of paying to display publicly.
Yeah. Just for, even if the work wasn't for sale, even if it was just like a gallery just to have it be seen.
Because there are many galleries that will show your work for pay.
Yeah.
Or there's companies that will put you in their magazine if you pay them.
Yeah.
And great exposure, but again, it's like, well, how is this transaction really benefiting the artist, and who is making the most benefit from this transaction?
Yeah.
It's rarely the artist.
Yeah, and the thing is that one person has a guarantee, and the other person has potential. And that's the thing about exposure that's such a trap for, I think, emerging artists, is this trap of, well, you'd get great exposure. I'm like, yeah, you need exposure. I do need people to see it. Depending on the work you're making, you need even more, if it's more niche work or whatever that a vast majority of the public isn't going to connect with in one way or the other, or appreciate, or whatever the aesthetics of it, then it's like, I need to find that audience. How do I find that audience? I still struggle with that with some of my work too, and that's the thing. For me, it's still a struggle of, where do I get seen, and what do I do to get seen, and would I pay for any type of exposure in a certain way or not? And part of it is just like, oh, well, what about my principles, and is that going to be a thing? But more often than not, it's like, well, I could just keep that 50, let's say it's $50, I can keep that $50 and I know I still have it in my pocket. Or I could spend it and maybe make 200, or maybe connect with someone who's going to buy a commission off me, or someone, maybe but more often than not, it has not been successful for me. So I mean, maybe it's just being bitter, but I mean, like, I also could keep that $50 in my pocket and just try to do it myself.
Yeah, and I think, and that's all that raises a whole other issue too of this like idea that like in this digital market world, you have so much more potential to be able to get your stuff out to people and to be able to sell it, but it literally becomes a full-time job. Like you could devote 40 hours a week to just your Etsy store, your Instagram page, your Facebook, all your social media presences, and then, you know, all your, like I said, if you have an Etsy store or somewhere that you're trying to, you know, if you're on, you know, DeviantArt and you're trying to sell stuff through there, to build a fan base and to get your work out there and to really get the exposure, you either need to hire someone to do it full time or you need to do it full time, which means you're not making the work, you're not making the art that you need to be promoting, or you're not having any income. You're not bringing anything in because you're spending all your time running these social media sites trying to compete against literally tens of thousands of other artists doing the exact same thing. It's a challenge.
And the Etsy store isn't something I thought of either. That totally fits into that category in a way, even though it's not being seen in a physical space. But I only decided
definitely connect to niche markets in there for sure.
Yeah, and that the potential of that is why I don't know why, but I never thought of starting an Etsy until like a month ago, and then because of how much criteria there is, it takes me forever just to enter in one piece. So I've been very slowly doing it.
Yeah.
But when I started it, I didn't know at the very beginning that it was like, oh, you have to pay, like, I think it's quarterly.
Pay to display.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's a tiny little charge. It's 10 cents per image or per piece that you want to sell.
Every 3 months, I think.
Yeah.
But
which is a better model because they're only taking a tiny transaction. But again, I don't know. So I recently started an Etsy store too, and I quickly realized that if I actually want to actually sell work and be profitable and successful, I have to devote an enormous amount of time to my Etsy store. I need to take high quality photos, staged photos of my work. It can't just be of my work. It has to be of my work framed in a nice living room with a nice couch and a nice this, or laying on a piece of nice cloth with some feathers and crap around it to make it, you know what I mean? Like all that very staged stuff, because that's how those stores work. That's how they sell. And it's a full-time job. And then you're like, well, am I an artist or am I an online marketer?
Yeah.
I'd rather be an artist. You know, it seems this so easy. Oh, I can just put it up online and it'll sell. Well, it doesn't work that way. I've had many pieces on Etsy for a long time now, and I've not sold a single piece because I'm not engaging with the audiences I need to. I don't have the time to devote to create a more interesting page.
Yeah.
So what do? Just keep producing art and hope that someone else will notice.
Yeah, and I don't know, that's a huge struggle that I think about all the time. And I don't, I think it would be, for me it's a dream to be a full-time artist, but I'm not putting the work into doing it, which is just my internal battle of like, that would be the most ultimate thing I could do. And a high school art teacher is second. Like, and even controversial within, you know, depending on who I'm talking to, in the school system, I say I'm an artist first and a teacher second. But I think that works to the advantage of either my knowledge and whatever else when it comes to students and being like, you know, you can show here, this place down here, this is how we would do that. How do we price artwork? How do we do this? Whatever. If I find a lot of teachers, depending on the school district you're in and stuff, you don't even have to have a degree in that subject matter. Like, it's just like, oh, you're a teacher. Okay, you can teach whatever. It doesn't really matter. And I would prefer if, you know, teachers have either a high interest or a high skill level or whatever, if not a degree in that subject they're trying to teach.
Passionate about, right?
Yes, yeah. And so, I don't know, I find that to my advantage. But, yeah, it's if that dream was to be a full-time artist, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket, which is I think the only way you can do it in so many ways. Then, like you said, it's almost like, I'll just sit back and wait to be discovered. Like, I'll put it up online and do the easy thing, because I know too, it takes a lot of work if you're trying to even sell something online. Like, I can put it up, and it only take me 5 minutes to post something on the buy and sell page, even if I just want to sell it locally. I'm not trying to get like more exposure than that. And it's like, hey, I'd really like to move this piece out of my studio. But even then, it's like, well, there's so many things, like I don't look at all the analytics on my Facebook page because yeah, that's a job. Then it becomes my job now is to research the statistics and figure out, is it even worth buying in, like, let's say ad space on Facebook, and who would that get shown to? And like, I noticed that on Instagram, like I see sponsored posts by other artists.
Yeah,
And in
all
some
the time.
cases, artists are collectors, but in a lot of cases, they are producers that aren't collecting other artists' artwork. So why am I seeing art, like, in some ways the algorithm just doesn't work. It's like, oh yeah, we'll just send this to other artists to look at,
Yeah.
and they're not the buyers. So I'm like, well then that means that if I were to put a sponsored ad up, it would just probably
Go
be
to all
seen
the
by-
other artists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, having to figure all that stuff out is, for me, one, overwhelming, and two, that's not what I want to be doing with my time. I want to be making the work.
Yeah.
And even on the Etsy page, I'm going to keep posting until I catch up with my current stock, and then wait X amount of months and be like, yeah, if I haven't sold anything, or if I haven't figured out how to do that, then maybe I'll just end up taking it off. Because by the time I post everything, like, it's not going to be just a couple dollars every 3 months, it'll be more. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, with the more posts, yeah, the more you put on, the more it costs. But even with Instagram, I found, I tried in 2019, I wanted to have a strong online presence, and I found Instagram was the social media platform for artists, it seems to be. So I kind of jumped onto that. I posted a lot in my first year on Instagram, and it's really petered out because I don't produce work fast enough to be able to be constantly putting up new works or in progress stuff. And I just managing just that one social media site was starting to take over. It was starting to take up so much time. I was getting advice from other social media people that I knew that were quite successful with it, and they're saying, oh, you need to have compelling stories, you need to have personal anecdotes, you need to be present on there both as an artist and your art making, you need to have not just your work but your lifestyle, insights into who you are, and you need to be posting regularly, daily, at least multiple times a week. If you can't do daily, you should be posting fresh work all the time, giveaways, contests, managing it, make sure you reply to everyone. And that, like, okay, that's one social media site. And so far it's yielded $0 in sales for me. $0 directly connected sales. I have sold because of weird connections I made on Instagram, which is, you know, there is positives to it, but it takes so much time and energy that you're like, I either quit my full-time job and risk, you know, not being able to pay my mortgage, not being able to pay my bills in hopes that this will take off, just to have enough time to still make work.
Yeah.
Because for me, I work a full-time job, so that leaves me only so many hours in a week to produce art, which means me only a tiny fraction of hours left to do Instagram and all this other stuff.
Like you said, otherwise you sacrifice how much art you're making, and that's not the ratio that I think we want. Because like X amount of hours trying to have an online presence versus X amount of hours in the studio making stuff.
Yeah, I hate that I spend more than an hour a day doing this.
Yeah, and I can't even commit to that. Like, it's, when it comes to art stuff, like there's some stuff that, I've been told the same thing, where I've noticed some of the similar things. Like, I want to make a post on Instagram daily if I can. It's not going to be able to work all the time. And sometimes I'll do a batch of, like, what I call, like, these design pieces. Like, I was like, oh, there's these little 12 by 12s. I just want to experiment with some color and see what would happen. I did all 3 of them at once. But I would spread those posts out, because I know that, like, oh, I'll post 3 in one day, and then what? What am I going to do the next 3 days? Consistency is super key, and I can't be consistent enough. But if I don't see the fruits of it enough, I'm going to stop doing something, because it's not worth my time. Because I used to do on Facebook, like, run little contests and give away free stuff. And some of it was stuff I wasn't super proud of, so I was like, well, I could paint over it, or I could try to give it away, maybe get some exposure. If I get people to share it, if people even just like it, it might show up into someone's newsfeed. So maybe the way that I run the contest is, okay, if you like the painting that you would want, if I have like 3 or 4 in there, and I pick whatever, and then I would see nothing from it other than, like, yeah, I drove to someone's house and gave them a painting because they won, and I didn't even get any, or if I did get, like, 2 or 3 likes on my page, well, those 2 or 3 likes didn't buy anything, because it's been like 1 or 2 months and nothing sold. So
I also found with a lot of my posts too, when I was posting regularly, daily, or really regularly, I was getting a certain amount of attention. When I started posting less frequently, every couple weeks, my posts seemed to be, I got a lot more views, I got a lot more responses and stuff, and I felt like, oh, maybe less is more with these, like maybe I shouldn't be posting all the time. So I've scaled back, and now my goal is to just keep focused on the work and post just enough to keep any kind of fan base I have engaged.
Yeah.
So for me, I try to post every couple weeks now.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to make something every few weeks, although I've been pretty slack so far this year.
Well, then it's like, oh, he hasn't posted for a week. Did he die? Like, what happened? And that's what, I don't know. That's the thing, too, is depending on what people are used to. But yeah, if the less is more thing works, too. I don't know.
Because more can be too much. There's a ton of artists that I stopped following on Instagram because I got tired of them. They post 14 things a day.
Yeah.
And I got really sick of my feed. It's just constantly all this person's work all the time. And it gets a little too much.
Well, I notice a lot of people recycle, like, they've shown something before, and so whether it shows up in their story or whether it shows up as an actual post, and it's just like, this is going to go way into too much of the technical aspects of stuff, but, so, the albums you can have on Instagram, like the highlights, from what I can tell, you actually can't put something in there fresh. It has to be something that you've posted in the archive before. Well, I would like to have albums on there that's like, this is the for sale album. Well, I can't do that unless I post that work that I've already posted earlier. But I didn't archive it the first time, or it was before I even made an Instagram. So if I wanted to post a work into that for sale and make that whole thing be a highlight and it's just there, which I think is a useful tool, it'd be like, oh, these are the works for sale, let me just check that out. That means that I've got to post a work I've already posted or a work that was made 10 years ago that I'm trying to sell.
I think that's where you probably need to have a website. Is a link to direct to, okay, here's my stuff for sale. Yeah. Which I'm guilty of. I don't have a website either.
Yeah, I just have the for sale album on Facebook. That's, yeah, I don't have a website.
I give out, I'm old school. I give out business cards to everyone I see. And that's literally like how I sell my work. I get the odd phone call or email or a text from somebody who saw one of my pieces somewhere and reached out and wants to buy something. Yeah. I've actually never sold through any online sources yet.
See, and I don't think I've sold a single, no one's inquired on an Instagram post ever. Like, no one has been like, oh, that, because I'll say for sale if it's a new, look, sometimes it is in process work or whatever, but a lot of times it's like, yeah, this is the piece that's finished for sale. Never once have I had an inquiry there. On the Facebook page and the for sale album, it's friends and family or acquaintances or whoever that's on there. They're like, oh, I want that. The buy and sell, and it depends on the area too. In Saskatoon, Kijiji is where I would sell more work. Here, the buy and sell page, I haven't sold a single thing off Kijiji since I've been here, but the buy and sell pages, I've sold a couple. And other than that, that's been it.
I never even tried it. I never even thought about buy and sell. I always thought it was just for garage sale stuff. I should try that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's been a couple that I've sold, and I said especially around Christmas. Yeah, and it's still interesting as to who buys what and when, and it's so inconsistent that it's sometimes hard to find a pattern or find what people are interested in. There's one that's strictly for home decor. It only lets you post and the thing, every buy and sell page has different rules. So
yeah,
but that one's you can only post 2 photos in your thing, and if it's well, this is a really big piece and I've got detailed shots because there's texture and whatever else I want to show, then yeah. But that's the only place since I've moved to Leopards that I have sold through an online kind of posting.
Interesting.
But yeah, maybe give that a shot, I guess. I don't know.
I'd be interested. I've often thought about trying to get into the handmade markets and the local markets scene, the craftier markets, but it's tough with original pieces because my original pieces they sell for quite a bit. And it's hard to have the capital to make enough prints and enough variety to put on a full display at something like that. So again, the other side of that pay to display is yeah, I could go do that, but it's going to cost me a lot of money and it's a big gamble because I don't know if I'll sell enough to make it back the money, right? And
that's something originally I was going to ask you about because I didn't know until I started going further back in your Instagram history, because at some point, I don't know when it was either it was after that show in May, because I'd been following the Girl Art Collective a little bit before then, but I don't think I found your personal Instagram until the thing in May, and so I just kind of been following from there, not really going back, and then recently when I started going back, I saw that you made prints, and that's another thing, I didn't have it on my sheet of questions I was going to ask, because I was I think I don't need to go into that, but I've been curious about it since you brought it up, because that is where a lot of artists find, like, okay, prints, that's where I can make some money, because this is accessible, $20,
yeah.
like, and I can mass produce it once. If you find a good printer, if you find like whatever, an image that just works, and it catches all the detail and stuff, then yeah, okay. Because the original work, I play around with the pricing so much of my work, because I don't even post the prices of my work unless it's a buy and sell page, because you have to. Because there's a point in time where if the work has been sitting there for 5 years, I don't even remember how much the canvas costs. I don't take anything into consideration anymore.
No.
The size, per square inch is usually how I price something, and then I start playing with it, because I'm like, well, I'd rather just go to someone who would just have it. And like, if it's in a gallery, then I'll price it more. It plays around with so much.
I've always been a big believer in like, and I get asked about pricing a lot, especially from newer artists too. You can sell it for whatever it will sell for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people always have it like, how much should I charge this much or that much, and it is difficult to price art, but it's worth whatever you can get for it. If you're asking 200 and no one's biting, it's not worth 200.
Yeah.
If you're asking 100 and several people are like jumping at it, you're selling too low, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it takes so long to find out where your pricing fits, because you need people to buy it to figure it out.
Yeah.
But that's something I always kind of give advice to new artists, is like, don't sell yourself short, but also you can't go by hours, and you can't go by material costs, and you can't go by sentimental costs, because you'll never ever make your money back.
Yeah.
You have to abandon the fact that it might take you 40 hours to sell a paint, or to make a painting, and you might have to sell that painting for $200.
Yeah.
So yeah, you made peanuts working on that, but it didn't matter, because the person that paid that $200 for it, that was a lot of money to them, and it meant the world for them to get that piece.
Yeah.
And it has deep value to them, and now any other piece of that size and quality, you can ask $200 for.
Yeah.
I think that's important. It takes a long time to find that, though.
It does, especially if you're, I don't know, I think the smaller the city, the smaller the opportunity for selling those pieces too, and getting them seen and whatever else. So it's a bit harder since I moved here for me to try and gauge, because I sold enough in Saskatoon, and I do think about materials and stuff, because I want to recoup the cost or break even if I can. I never think about hours, but I have the luxury of working really quickly with the style of art that I work in. So to me, I never feel like, well, if I paid myself $10 an hour, then like I just don't think about it.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite. My material costs are low, but my time put in is ridiculously high.
Yeah.
So I have to abandon hours, or I'll never get paid.
Yeah, and I never need to think about it, because my stuff's pretty quick. So I usually go by, okay, my canvas costs this size, and generally with my materials or whatever, like I think about it a little bit, but I go by like 25 cents per square inch is a starting point for me within a certain size. And then again, having sold a certain amount of work, like you said, well, if everyone's jumping at it, you're pricing too low, if no one's biting. But then if you start playing with it too, I'm like, well, yeah, but this is, let's say it's, a 32 by 48, and you believe in the work, and it's worth that much. But again, it's worth that much in the context of that, like we talked earlier about, like looking at art and learning how to look at art, and it's like, yeah, so another artist would know it's worth that much.
There's a buyer for it somewhere, but
yeah, whether it's here, that's a whole different thing, because whether or not someone can appreciate, again, for me doing abstract work, it's like, yeah, I think abstract work sometimes is really like art for artists a lot of the time, where it's like, yes, I can appreciate the textures and the composition and everything else, and no, it wasn't just, I don't even like Pollock's paintings for their aesthetic quality at all. They don't do anything for me. His philosophy is a whole different thing, but I can't even appreciate it aesthetically, but I know that it wasn't just random. It wasn't just random splattering and that was it. Like, something went into that. There was a process and everything else that was learned, and there's composition and balance, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But a lot of people don't see that when they look at abstract art. So I find, for me, that's like 80% of what I make, if not more. That's where my struggle is. Like, no, I know that it's worth this much. Like, just because no one wants to pay that, I can't lower it more than that, because at that point then it is maybe less than breaking even sometimes, or whatever, or I just like, yeah, it's difficult.
Something else I tell young artists and new artists trying to sell too is that don't ever sell yourself short. If you've decided that this is what it's worth, don't take a penny less than that, and don't let people haggle for it.
Yeah.
Because it's insulting.
Yeah, I don't do the haggling bit, but I've definitely lowered prices. Like I mentioned earlier that I never made a landscape till I moved to Lethbridge, and I loved that landscape. I thought it was a good landscape, and like in the technical ability as well as just like what I got from it conceptually and the connection. I've definitely I eventually sold it after 2 years. It was around Christmas, whether it was coincidence or not, but I also lowered it. Like I had it, I don't remember what the size. I think it was 24 by 36, and I originally was like, hey, $200. I really feel comfortable with that. And I think that if it was in a gallery, I probably would have priced it at like 300.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, hey, I feel comfortable with that. $200. That's great. And I ended up selling it for 100. Like because 2 years had passed, despite the fact how much I believed in that work. It wasn't I lowered it for someone specifically because it was like I'm just pricing it at 100 now. I want it gone.
That's the thing too, right? If you just want it gone, you're willing to take a little less. And I've also found the longer I have a piece in my collection, the less I'm willing to let it go for. You know what I mean? Because it's the longer I've looked at it, it's become less precious. I've made things since then that are more personal and more valuable to me. So now this piece isn't quite as important as it was when I first made it. So it's a few years down the road. Now I'm like, yeah, okay, I wanted $1,000 for it, but I'll sell it for 400.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing too. It fluctuates for sure. I know my work pricing, I try to price by size for the most part.
Yeah.
But that's tricky too. Because sometimes I can put 120 hours into a work this big, or I can put 5 hours into a work this big.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Both have equal value in a way, but and buyers always tend to go by size too. They expect that size determines it. It's like, well,
sometimes, but
it's tricky because some of my smaller paintings I put way more hours in than my large paintings.
Yeah.
Large paintings they're different. You have more room to work. I don't know. Scale is a fun thing to play with.
Yeah, well, fun. Yeah, fun's one word for it. I don't know. I want to force myself to do smaller work because I find it difficult. So to me, that would be the challenge: is how do I make, even if it's abstract. Sometimes I'm like those little 12 by 12s. I doubt because I'm just like, that's like it's just such a small space. I feel like they're too busy. I'm like, so then I'm like, well, I start thinking about it too much when I start working smaller because I'm like, well, if it's too minimal, there's not enough going on. What is it, like a Rothko piece? Like I just got 2 colors and that's it, like, and 1 stripe. Like, what's going on here?
I struggle the same. I used to, my early work, my work in university and my work earlier was always really large scale. I worked on like 4x4 canvases or 5x5 big stuff. But that became, I still love working that way, but it became difficult to deal with. It's hard to transport, it's heavy, it's hard to sell, it's expensive. Like material costs to go in are expensive, to build the canvas is expensive, or to buy it, the amount of paint it covers to cover it, to come up with a concept that works on a huge scale, and then to execute it in a way that creates a nice composition, or whatever you're going for on that scale is always more difficult. And I just got tired of fighting with the size of things.
Yeah.
So it was a struggle for me. My work over the years has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because I want to be able to produce more pieces, be able to transport them easier, show more pieces in a small space. So I guess in a way my work has been influenced externally that way. I still love working large, but I don't do it anymore because it's impractical. It's hard to sell, it's hard to transport, it's hard to ship.
Yeah, my only hurdle with working big at first was just the capital for the canvas. That was the first thing, and I was like, and immediately I'm like, well, sure, I'll buy this thing for $80, but that means I have to sell it for X amount, and yeah, it will be harder to sell. So, but again, if I find the right venue for it, if it's in a gallery, all of a sudden things change and there's more because I would like to work even bigger than I work now, much bigger, because I think this is better suited for me now with the mediums I'm using and just with how I can fill the space and the confidence I feel working bigger. To me, that feels like, okay, that means I'm going in the right direction if I feel confident in that. And just because I'm experimenting with small doesn't mean I can't find a way to work small.
Small is also so intimate. I found.
Okay, so professionalism failed me and my battery died. So that's what happened there. I realized we were talking about the business of art for like a good long while and just ranting back and forth about it, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I asked you the question, what are your thoughts on pay for display? Do you feel like you've answered that?
For the most part, I think that I have more I have more to chew on now about it. Because again, my thoughts about it are still, I'm in the position as, I don't know what to call myself. I'm definitely not a full-time artist, I know that. So like, I'm in the position where I focus on selling, and so I'm trying to focus on exposure, and where I'm still playing with I mentioned kind of the principles of it before, of like, well, it's not so much about the principles for me of like, well, I'm not going to pay because whatever. It's more of like, it's not going to be worth it. And then there's the question that it might be. So I don't like the idea of that model, because I think that there's, like, from the person presenting that model, they're going into it very obviously with, I think, their bottom line in mind. So that makes me adverse to wanting to participate in their model. But in some ways, I'm like, well, that might just be what gets the art in front of a certain person that it might matter to. So depending, I think it's really situational. I don't like the idea of the model, so that I can say point blank. And if I find other opportunities, I'd rather take those than that one, even though it might not be in front of as many people. I feel much better about that at the end of the day, doing it the way that the Guerrilla Art Collective kind of sees that. And the opportunities I can find for myself, even if they're in just like small places that are, again, they're not for display in a gallery setting, but they're for display for people to enjoy while they're getting, like some at Big John's Books, or...
Yeah, I just recently had work at the Penny Art, or the Penny Coffee House. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, those are, it's still a public space, so...
Yeah. And they can still be for sale. So, and that's, and I don't know what their process is, because I haven't had work in there, but if it's...
I don't know, they reached out to me, I actually don't know their process. I'm sure there's an application for
Yeah.
it. They have a curator that takes care of it.
Okay.
But
they don't
get your info.
But they don't take, do they take commission from anything that sells, or?
You know, that's something I never discussed, actually. That's probably something I should have discussed at the beginning. That's something you should always discuss right up front. But I did sell a piece through there, and they did not ask for a commission. So I either bypassed the process, or wasn't informed clearly about it. But I think the artists get to take 100% there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But not every place does. Most places take some kind of commission, which is fair. If they're giving you public space to show in and you have a chance to sell, you probably owe them something.
Yeah, and then I think, I don't know, part of it, I always thought too, was like, well, instead of paying for permanent work that you're using there as decor, you get a revolving door of artwork that changes all the time without you paying anything. So for me, sometimes it's like, yeah, equal trade. I get to keep 100% of what I get, and you get to have a revolving door of art through there all the time. Yeah. So yeah, in some ways, like I said, I feel much better at the end of the day with that model in every aspect than having to pay just to be like, hey, we've got the space and you'll get the eyes on it, and that's where it ends.
I guess it's going to come down to every artist's individual choices and goals. It's funny, you've kind of opened it up too here. I came in with a very, anti-pay for display attitude, and I'm like, well, I'm starting to really consider. there's lots of times and places where maybe pay for display is a valid option for that artist or that time, or I'm even considering eventually taking out that Instagram ad just to get more exposure, to get more higher networking contacts or whatever it is. Yeah. So I don't think there's a clear answer. I think pay for display is something you need to think about a lot before you jump into it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes, like we talked about definitions and stuff earlier, but what is art? And I feel like sometimes it just devolves into, hey, everything's situational. So and that's the thing with, like I said, pay for display. Even just the term leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm way more adverse to that because it doesn't feel as good, and because it's a gamble. But again, showing somewhere is a gamble too, and whether or not I want to put the time and energy into even writing out an application if it's for free, or if it's a juried thing, or no matter what, it's like, how much time and energy am I going to put into that, and maybe there'll be no payoff at all. So even if it's for free, I don't know. And unfortunately, because a lot of my everything I make is for sale, it's not just, hey, I wanted someone to look at it and it's not for sale, I want to take it home at the end of the day. It's like, no, I would like for someone to have that so that I don't have that sitting here anymore. Like, I'm done with it. Like, once I make it, I'm finished with it. So I don't want to have it up in my house, and I didn't make it as a product for consumption as like the first priority. It's not an afterthought either though. It's just like, hey, I got what I needed to get out of it when I made it. Now it's someone else's, whoever's that is in the future. So if I end up going home with my piece at the end of the day, that was part of the gamble of the time and energy to get it shown, and that's what's going to happen here at Street Legal right away, because nothing out of the however many pieces are there, I've sold it all. I'm like, okay, well, I whatever. I got my display across. The artist statement there was really important for it, because it was like, hey, MK Ultra, let's learn about that a little bit, and then have some questions to think about. And I'll never know for the people that viewed it, like, unless someone took a piece home, I mean, they just might like the aesthetics of it. That might be it. So I still won't know how engaged they were. That thing was more about engagement, about a topic. And I only got evidence of that actually through Instagram, where someone was like, hey, I actually looked into this a little bit, and like, I learned about, I forgot his first name, whatever, last name was Olsen. And I was like, oh wow, that makes me really happy. So I didn't actually need to show it there to have someone engage with it that way. But anyway, yeah, that whole pay for display model, and there's more than one model under that moniker, I guess. But it gets me thinking more about, this conversation made me think about how, it made me think about the business of art again. Like, it's always on my mind, but like, we talked about Etsy, which is still new to me, and we talked about, again, just refreshing my mind as to how much friggin' work it is to get things into a place where they're seen and available for purchase, and then thinking about having to ship things and whatever else. And so that's overwhelming. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, if I do want to move some of these paintings out of here, how am I going to do that? And I need to reevaluate, I guess, what I'm willing to do and how much energy I'm willing to put in. So
yeah, it's tough, man, because as an artist, you just want to make the work. That's all you want to do is make the work. But if you're trying to sell, even if you're not trying to sell, even if you're just trying to get out there so people know your work and see your work, and you start building up kind of a following, that none of that has to do with art making. Yeah. And no one ever teaches you those skills of not just how to market yourself, but how to run a business, how to try to profit off your art is a whole skill set that most artists don't have. We spend all our time making. Yeah. So it's a challenge. It really is. Like, so my advice, if you're considering paying to be able to display somewhere, really sit down and hash out what's the benefit to you, what's the benefit to your art, what's the benefit, what will the benefit be moving forward for this? Is it worth whatever they're asking for whatever it is? I think we probably open up more questions than we answered.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, I think those are some of the best times. Like, that's almost the best conversation, is that I've got more to think about than I came in. I didn't actually get a resolution. It's the fact that I opened it up even more.
Yeah. So. Wow. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Well, thank you.
I'm Dave Bullied, and this was my Artist Life.
Okay, just a little bit of an outro here. I mentioned in the intro about the things that we discussed and a little bit about what we didn't discuss. Crazily enough, we didn't go into a lot of detail, or any really, about the art that he makes. I had a prompt written down that was dark and beautiful, because that's what he has as kind of like a little bio tagline on his Instagram, and I just didn't phrase it in the way that it caught, and then we started talking about it. We ended up talking about Guerrilla Art Collective and stuff, and then that was something I wanted to talk about anyway, so we just naturally ended up going onto that path, and I never steered it back to his art and what kind of art he even makes. I just realized after he left, holy crap, we didn't even really get into that. So if you were someone listening or watching who's not familiar with his art, you don't really know what kind of art he makes. We talked about it off camera. I was familiar with it off camera, and huge faux pas, huge mistake, and failure by me. So something, again, I'm going to be working on. However, I would encourage you to look up his art on Instagram. You can look up Dave Bullied Art, DaveBulliedArt. Look up Dave Bullied Art. You can look at his stuff there. I really enjoy his art, and we got to talk a little bit about that off camera. Not a lot about a detail into, the how and the why of the expression and what it means and unpacking everything. Coincidentally, that's something that when we discussed off camera, he was like, yeah, I don't really like to unpack everything. I don't like artist statements. I don't want to do that. Like, everyone has their own personal histories to bring to the work, so whatever statement I put out there might get ignored anyway, and just wants to leave it completely open for the viewer, which I can appreciate. And we talked about that, like I said, off camera. So anyway, something I'm going to work on in the future for sure, and I feel weird that I didn't get to do it this time, or that I had an opportunity to do it and I didn't do it, because it just completely vacated my mind after I initially had that prompt go out. So look up his work, follow him on Instagram. He's got an Etsy store up as well. I will put his information in the description of the podcast and in the description of the YouTube video. So that is there. I encourage you to look it up. I really enjoy his work, especially what he ended up calling the bird totem women, I think were his words. Yeah, using, a different color spectrum. He had 7 different pieces that were part of this series, monochromatic work. That is what really attracted me to his work. That's the first thing that I saw when I saw his work. And yeah, I really enjoy that work and its aesthetic quality. And we started talking a little bit about how we could unpack it. But I'll leave that up for you, because I'm sure that's what he'd want. So anyway, go check out Dave Bullied art and enjoy.